Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss topics related to sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
Hello to all of our compounding friends and colleagues. Thank you for joining Seth and I again on this adventure that we call the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast. This is episode number 7. And I can tell you, man, time flies because we're having a lot of fun talking with industry professionals and just getting information out there and always, of course, trying to raise the bar. On today's episode, we're going to talk with Jons Pritchett with Accreditation University, which is a part of the Accreditation Commission for Healthcare, the ACHC. And if you've ever met John, you know he is an absolute wealth of knowledge, and I've enjoyed getting to know him over the past year or so because we've had an opportunity to speak side by side, and we've also become friends. So I welcome him and join him to the show today. So John, if you would please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, guys, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate a chance to get to talk, and I'm a fan of the podcast. I've listened to every episode so far, so it's great. My background goes, I always say it's like a lot of other people that are in pharmacy. A lot of us got exposed to it at a fairly early age, and I'm one of those. Started out just first job as a 15-year-old working in a large chain drugstore, and my initial role was working the front register, but one day they needed help counting pills back in the pharmacy, so went back there and started helping out and never really looked back. Decided to go into pharmacy and pursued pharmacy school in college. And while I was there, I had gotten into pharmacy through a retail track, but getting exposure to things like hospital practice and different things that really intrigued me. And I very much enjoyed the clinical aspects of what we were learning. But I always just liked what I did in retail pharmacy, that setup, that type of interaction with patients. So I was always looking for a blend of those two worlds, and came upon compounding probably in my first or second year of pharmacy school. And most of my exposure to it up to that point was making simple things, putting a few creams together, magic mouthwash every now and then. But learned a little more about what some of these compounding-only pharmacies were doing, where they were getting their patients, they were applying their clinical knowledge and making unique doses and types of things for those individuals. And that completely resonated with me. That just sounded perfect. And I'm very much a hands-on type person. I enjoy working with things and building things. And so it seemed like the right fit. So focused a lot of my attention in pharmacy school towards compounding. Met some great mentors along the way, and sort of looking forward. A lot of those folks were people that were involved in PCAB and USP early on. But yeah, worked with those guys, and when I finished pharmacy school, it was right when 797. It really hadn't even come out yet, but it was in its infancy, and people were talking about it and starting to implement it. I was lucky enough to go ahead and come on with a pharmacy that they started out as a retail pharmacy and had branched into compounding. Really had been doing it all along the ways, but got into it heavily in the 90s. And they had just opened a compounding-only location, and my job was to take a hood in a closet and turn it into a 797 compliant clean room. So that was one of my first forays into that, and that just sparked a great time. In that process, we were one of the early adopters of PCAB accreditation, so went through that process when it was in its beginnings. And I went through that process, initial survey, and then 2 resurveys. Or I should say reaccreditations. Resurveys could sound like we did bad, but initial accreditation and 2 reaccreditations, and then got the opportunity after that to come and see what's going on over here at PCAB. So back in 2014, I joined ACHC, and currently my role here is Associate Director of Pharmacy. And Functionally, I oversee our compounding programs. So primarily, I spend my time in PCAB accreditation. But we also work with pharmacies that undergo our ACHC inspection services program. That's usually used for things like non-resident licensure. And then it also branches into other areas of things we touch, like infusion pharmacy. Obviously, there's a strong 797 component, and even getting into things like specialty and long-term care that can have a place as well.
Great. So in weeks past, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about USP 800 and engineering and facilities. And we've had the opportunity to talk to Sherry Kramer at Pharmacy Specialties. And I understand that she was actually the very first pharmacy to get the hazardous drug distinction that the ACHC has put out there. So help us understand a little bit more about that program and how that program was developed and the why behind that.
Yeah, so I've been watching what's going on with USP 800 for years. In fact, when I had my second PCAP reaccreditation, that's one of the things our surveyor talked about. If I'm not mistaken, he was on the USP committee at the time that was beginning to develop this. And one of the things he talked about was this new chapter coming out, USP 800. It's going to be about handling hazardous drugs. And we started talking about things like negative pressure spaces, dedicated rooms for hazardous drug handling. And so we were already thinking about it at that point. Fast forward, we started seeing the first drafts of USP 800 come out, and like a lot of you guys, I sat in on the phone calls that USP would do, and they'd talk about what was put out. We went and made comments on things, went through the revisions. And all the while we're watching this, and I can tell you over here at ACHC, we're always trying to keep a pulse with what was going on in the compounding community. Not everybody embraced USP 800. There were certainly some people that were early adopters, and whatever's coming, they were going to do it. Other folks they were taking a slower approach, and they really wanted to watch what's the world around us doing with this. Is everybody just going to jump on board? Are different things like, are the different regulators going to require? What's my state board going to do with it? What's the FDA going to do with it? What's OSHA going to do with it? And all these different little pieces of things going on. And as we get closer and closer to the implementation of USP 800, we could see there was no kind of unified way of looking at that. Different states some were picking different implementation dates, backing it out 2 or 3 years. Some were looking at a partial adoption, maybe just table 1 of the NIOSH list, or only requiring engineering controls for certain drugs. There are different little caveats in different places. So there was enough uncertainty in the industry where we felt like it was going to be difficult to take a hard stance on what to do. We figured if we require everyone to be fully USP 800 compliant, that at some point we might actually drive a wedge between us and some of the pharmacies that we work with. So what we sought to do was create a program. Part of it is to be able to educate pharmacies. They use our standards, a lot of them, to learn what USP says. So we wanted to create a program, put it out there so that pharmacies could get the standards and use them in their own development. We wanted them to be able to bring it online at their own pace, and really work with them to come along and do this at the time that was right for them. So something that we have over at ACHC, and really this is with some of our other programs. So a good example is with specialty pharmacy, we offer what's called distinctions that tack on to the specialty pharmacy program. So as of today, you can have specialty pharmacy accreditation, and you can get a distinction in, let's just say, oncology or HIV management. It's a higher level of accreditation. You show that you've met standards to achieve that higher level and that distinction. So that's what we did with hazardous drug handling. It's a distinction in hazardous drug handling. It's an add-on really to any pharmacy program, because the thing we've got to remember is this is not just compounding specific, but it's anybody involved with handling hazardous drugs. So it can be added to our infusion, our specialty accreditation, long-term care, any of those where it might be applicable. And it's an optional add-on for pharmacies. So again, if pharmacies like Sherry that were early adopters, if they've already done everything and want to achieve the distinction for it, this provides them a way to do that. Otherwise, it gives pharmacies kind of a blueprint, if you will, of how to come into compliance with USP 800 and meet with our mission of assisting them with getting where they need to go.
So, John, what do ACHC surveyors look at during the survey? Are they looking at, those intimate details of what Chapter 800 says, like smooth, impervious, and non-shedding surfaces? So tell us about the survey process for the distinction.
Yeah, so that's going to be very similar to what we're already doing today. So I can tell you right now that our big focus when we're on survey, it's really not to sit and read an SOP manual. We're very interested in the actual processes the pharmacy's going through. So we're going to spend time observing what's going on. So part of that's looking at the lab. How's it laid out? Is it the right types of materials? Is it the right types of counters? Is it free from cracks and crevices? Is the floor right? We'll want to look at how the engineering's set up. Is the air flowing appropriately? And part of that's going to be looking at the certification records for both the CSEC as well as the CPEC. It's going to be observing processes. So, Brian, I know you talk a lot in what you do about how folks handle powders and contain things. That would certainly be part of it, watching how does the pharmacy staff actually work in that space. And, that gets you to a spot where you look for a thread and you pull it if there's an issue, but you can observe everything at that point from how do drugs come into the space, how are they manipulated while they're there, how are things disposed of, so waste from the actual process, things like PPE getting disposed, how do they get transported out of the lab, what kind of PPE is being used, what kind of cleaning's going on, and even getting beyond that, how are things stored, how is personnel trained. So it's really looking into all the different aspects of what's covered in USP 800.
Do you guys have USP 800 workshops? And when's the next USP 800 workshop that you guys have, and what do you guys actually cover?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do with our 800 workshops was offer something a little bit different. I know there's a lot of really good programs out there that tell you what's in USP 800, and that certainly has value. I mean, I'm always surprised, but I ask the question when I'm in a room with a group of pharmacists, and I say, who here has read USP 800? And I can tell you that even at NCPA this year, when I did that in a group of about 100 pharmacists, probably less than 30% raised their hand. But so there's value in learning what's in 800, but we wanted to take it a step further and talk about, how do you go about implementing 800? Let's talk about what some of this stuff might actually look like. So our workshops on USP 800, they tend to be coupled along with a PCAB accreditation workshop. So folks either have the option to come out, and usually there's one day of PCAB accreditation where we cover our standards for sterile and non-sterile compounding. And then day 2 is talking about USP 800. Folks could choose to do either one. They could either come to both days or they could just come to USP 800 if that's pertinent to them. It's a good time. It's a collaborative time. We always encourage lots of discussion, lots of questions. And, I tell you learn just as much a lot of times from the folks that are in the room as you do from us as presenters. And we've had folks that sat on the USP committee attend. We've had folks like Brian Prince come out who we conscripted him, and now he actually helps deliver the workshop most of the time. So if you guys like what you're hearing from Brian here on the podcast, he definitely brings an added level of quality in what we do at our workshops. But we tend to do one about every quarter. A lot of times we host them at our headquarters, which is in Cary, North Carolina, just right outside of the Raleigh Airport, very easy to get to. Now, we do understand that can be tough for folks, coming from the middle or even the western side of the country. So we're trying to spread out and do some West Coast workshops more and more. And in fact, the next one coming up is in February in Salt Lake City. So if you want to come ski in Utah in February, I believe it is February. Let me get my calendar pulled up here. should have that ready to go for you. That is February 7th and 8th. If folks want to follow when we're having workshops, they can go to accreditationuniversity.com. We keep our workshop dates up to date there. I know we've got dates listed through May. We're working on getting the rest for 2018 available. So, again, Salt Lake City, February 7th to 8th. I know we've got one in May in Cary. We're working on one in Memphis, probably sometime in the spring. And we'll probably have another West Coast offering coming around to the latter part of 2018 as well. So, again, accreditationuniversity.com. Pay attention to the website and see about getting signed up.
One of the things that I'll echo from John's explanation is with the workshops, we want to go beyond just what does the chapter say, because I've actually been a part of lots of different seminars online, live, and basically what they do is they regurgitate what's in the chapters. And we tell you exactly what's in the chapter with the workshops, but we want to give you more of an application style to that. So we actually will walk you through the chapter and what that chapter means and how you would implement it. So understand that when these educational workshops are brought forth, they're brought forth with a lot of meat on the bone. Probably not the best symbolism, but the reality is that we want to walk you down the path. And when I talk, I speak specifically about what facility and engineering actually means inside of that. I speak about what is the assessment of risk look like and how to actually do that. And we go through a little bit of a worksheet application. And so it really is of great benefit. And since now we have a little bit more planning time, till December 1st of 2019, it gives us that opportunity to say, okay, let me kind of take these small bites and these small chunks. I think the most overwhelming thing of the chapter is, of course, the chapter and saying, okay, now I've got to tackle this huge elephant. And one of the little, icons that I use in my presentation is, how do you eat an elephant? And we know that is one bite at a time. And so you want to take those small bites, little bit by little bit by little bit. Those folks that are going to wait till the last minute, they're going to try to chomp and take down that entire elephant, are going to get very overwhelmed by the process. So now that we've got a little bit more breathing time between now and then, that new implementation date, take it small bites at a time. And we certainly hope that you join us at one of the workshops, wherever it works out for you. And we will give you real life application for the educational workshop.
When you were talking about the story of making a clean room out of a closet, I was going to ask you a little bit more about that. How long of a process was it for you back then, if you can remember converting over that space, and what kind of hurdles did you go through in trying to get up to compliance with those standards?
So, I think the thing we realized pretty quickly was that we were only going to get so far with the space that we had. So the timing was actually right for us at that point, where we ended up moving to another location and putting in a modular clean room. So that was part of it, is just realizing that the space we had, it wasn't quite working for what we were going to need to do. So went ahead and invested, and part of that was bringing in people that could help get us where we needed to be quickly. To your point, going through accreditation, learning about standards and that sort of thing. For a lot of pharmacies that are new to this sort of thing, if they've not even talking about accreditation necessarily, but trying to get in compliance with USP standards and move towards that, it can be a pretty big process. I can tell you that when we first went through accreditation, and I think we're probably talking 2006, 2007, somewhere in there, we spent a year getting ready, and that was part of that was just making sure we had our processes in place, but a lot of it was getting our documentation in order. It was writing SOPs. At the time, you just didn't have a lot of SOP manuals available to you, so we had to create those. And you think about us as pharmacists, sometimes we're our own worst enemies, and we try to do everything. And when you're running a small business, and you're not only the pharmacist that's in charge, but you're the compounder a lot of times, and then you're also the bookkeeper and the janitor and the courier and all of the above. So finding the time to write SOPs can be difficult. Something I encourage people to do a lot now is we have a lot more resources available to us. There's folks out there with expertise, and they can help move the needle on this and move you along. So, I highly suggest either talking to your colleagues about what kind of consultant services did they use, either people coming on site to help them out. Sometimes it's just you need some tools like manuals or workbooks available. And, I can tell you with Accreditation University, like we talked about for the workshops, they do offer things of that nature, consultants, SOP manuals, different tools you might need to move that along.
Are those all things that ACHC has actually are those services that you guys do?
Yes. So with Accreditation University was put together with the customer in mind. We always had people who they wanted help with accreditation, depending on where they were. Some people, they are in it, they're loaded, they're ready to go, they've got the resources to dedicate towards it, no problem. But other folks, they may have a time issue, they may not be able to devote the what they need to towards getting ready for accreditation. So we put that together. Accreditation University has been around for about 2 years now. And it started out with doing workshops, but quickly expanded out into really customized consulting services for whatever somebody may need. So, like I say, it could be SOP manuals, it could be a workbook, and it can really be anything up through on-site consulting. Some folks even have the consultants come out once a year just to do an annual compliance check, just kind of a check us off, make sure we're good type thing, because in the world we live in now with so many different regulatory type things going on, some folks have decided that it's worthwhile to them to do that type of thing.
I guess I didn't even know that about that side of the business. So that's pretty cool.
It's newer, and a lot of folks aren't aware of it yet. But it's been really good, and it's separated from ACHC. I mean, we use a lot of the same personnel, and a lot of folks that help out with the consulting, they are PCAB surveyors, and I shouldn't just say PCAB, it's all ACHC programs. But if you go through Accreditation University to do something, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't share what they did when we come out on survey. When they're kept as two distinct processes to keep everything clean on each side of the business.
So was Sherry's Pharmacy, was that a beta site to help the ACHC work through what that distinction in hazardous drug handling was going to kind of look like?
Yeah, well, we wanted a pharmacy that had actually gone through the process. It's one thing to write standards and conceptualize what we want this to be, but we always like to take our standards and try them out in a live setting. With USP 800, unfortunately, there's just not that many settings that are ready to go. So we reached out to some of the consultants that do work for PCAB, and that's actually one of the things through Accreditation University. There's something called certified consultants. They're people who help folks get ready for accreditation, and asked, who do you have that has already started to look towards USP 800? And Sherry came up, and Sherry's somebody that if you've been in the compounding community long, you probably know her. She's involved in a lot of things, and certainly has a desire for quality. And we talked to her, and she was about ready for renewal on her PCAB accreditation, so the timing was right, and we went ahead and did her PCAB survey and added on the distinction in hazardous drug handling while we were there. We went ahead and looked at those standards, and I can say that she did a great job getting ready. And it was a real treat to see her lab. She's put a lot of work and effort. Her staff's really worked hard and trained well, and I'm just really proud of what they did and the success they're achieving.
What is with there being so many compounders from North Carolina? So Gigi, we were at dinner, and Gigi said something about there just isn't a whole lot of representation from North Carolina, and everyone kind of giggled, and I was like, what are you guys talking about? And apparently on the USP committee, there's 5 people all from North Carolina. I mean, and you're from North Carolina.
Yeah. I don't know, unless maybe we just have a good community of folks here. I can tell you, I know Gigi well. and she's actually assisted with some things we do over here at PCAB, and we still stay in touch with that. We've always had a good collaborative group here in North Carolina, and I can tell you that, when I was still in practice, it wasn't uncommon for us to pick up the phone and call each other and work through things, and we referred to each other as friendly competitors. I don't know, it was a good place for it.
Well, that's brings up, part of the reason why I started doing all this is that, like, I always say that I'm in my own little bubble in Kentucky, and I get inspectors from California and the NABP and Kentucky, and I get my pat on the back and good job, but I don't know what anybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So it's great that you guys are able to have that relationship, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is encourage that a little bit more. Like, yes, we are competitors, but we're all focused on quality, or at least we should be.
And we have raising the bar for everybody.
Right.
And, that's the way it should be. That we should all want to collaborate with each other, that, we can put the competition to the side and understand that we've all got, business development people who are stepping on top of each other in various states. But the reality is that we can all collaboratively learn something from each other. I never want to think that I'm going to be the smartest guy in the room ever, right? I can learn something from everybody. And I think that's, when you go to those events, Seth, like you're at now, and you guys got to go all have dinner together and have drinks and hang out, that's an awesome opportunity. And I've seen that so many times, like at CCH this year, you see people who otherwise probably wouldn't have the opportunity to mingle, and that's what they're doing at the bar, and they're talking and just, making new relationships, man. I can't say enough about the networking within the industry.
The sidebar conversations are where it happens, no doubt. And that's kind of the point I was making about our workshops, Brian, and I know you've experienced that. I mean, when we had, I won't throw names out there, but you were one of those people, Brian, where the other day Brian and I were trying to remember how we met, and it was like, oh yeah, you were at our workshop making all these comments, and I had to silence you. But no, I mean, you have folks like him come out, you have people who've sat on the USP committees, and they lend fantastic insight while we're there talking, and those discussions that occur are just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the information we're presenting up from the stage.
Thanks so much for joining us for another awesome episode. Like Brian said at the beginning, we're having a great time doing this. Another excellent conversation. It was great speaking with John Pritchett this week. Thank you so much, John. We really appreciate you. Please join us next week. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Wayne DeHaven and James Brown from Pharmetric Laboratory. We'll be talking about method suitability and rapid microbial methods for testing sterility. On another note, I've been getting a whole bunch more questions through the chat box, my website. Please keep those coming. I really enjoy and appreciate those great interactions. So thank you very much. And again, thanks for everyone for listening. And as always, keep raising the bar.